role is to really facilitate. And of course, we have tools and methodologies and expertise, but it's about bringing the business expertise from the business experts themselves and drawing that knowledge from there, because the value that somebody who is in the business, who's grown the business, who's participated in it day in and day out, has a value that just cannot be replaced.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi, and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske here. I like to start off by saying thank you so very much for your support of the show. For without you, it wouldn't be as fantastic as it is now. Talking about fantastic individuals, we're on the line with Bridgitte Lawler. How are you, Bridgitte?
Hello, Rick. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I like to say I've had 2 feet and a heartbeat, and I certainly can't complain. Now, Bridgitte and I were just having some technical difficulties prior to the call, and it's kind of ironic given part of Bridgette's exposure to technology, of which we're going to be talking about, along with her book, Humanity Through Technology. But before we do that, Bridgitte, I always like to start off by talking about the individual behind the books, behind the business, behind all of that stuff that we do. Now, I'd love if you could, with that in mind, to share a little bit about what you like to do when you're not working, if there is such a thing.
There is such a thing, Rick. There definitely is such a thing. And I think one of the most important things to do is to not work sometimes.
Yep.
I think if you know, everybody needs to carve out a little bit of time to disconnect, and however much time that needs to be for you is for you to decide, depending on what you're trying to achieve and depending on what you need. On my side, I have 2 very active beagles. I'm fortunate enough to live quite close to the countryside, and my disconnecting time usually means that I'm wandering around some fields or forests and, with my dogs, and they have an amazing, curious nature, and I think that matches my own. So going out and just disconnecting. I try not to use my phone unless I'm taking pictures of them while I'm there, and just being, fully in that moment, enjoying some surrounds and disconnecting completely.
And that's a wonderful context to gain. Thank you for sharing that. Now, and I say that is because I wonder, when you're in that moment and you're in nature, you're just walking around, taking in the air. Do you often find that you'll get some of your best ideas when you're in nature?
Absolutely. This is my thinking time.
Yeah.
It's my inspiration and thinking time.
So do you often find yourself when you do that, you've had something come up in your business, which we're going to talk about shortly. Have you had solutions come to you that, that light bulb moment?
Yes, for sure. Often if I have something that's a bit challenging, something that, I'm having a bit of a struggle working through, and it can also just be in the middle of the day, I'll pick up the dog leashes, take a walk out there, because having a change of perspective, a change of energy, just, blowing the cobwebs out, very often I come up with some inspired ideas, or else it's sometimes about how to make something happen. Because having an idea is one thing. Sometimes you know what you got to do or where you need to head towards, but taking those first 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 steps can sometimes be the most difficult part.
I wonder, through your bio, I was reading it, and it's very in depth, and you talk about perspective, and we're going to be talking a little bit later on in the call about your experience in multiple countries and living in multiple countries as well. But let's go back a little bit further than that. When you decided that it was a good idea to leave a stable corporate job to start on your entrepreneurial journey, where did that spark come from?
Well, I think I had an itch for a little while. I had an amazing corporate job. I had I had a good time. I had a very good time in the corporate world. I traveled the world. I had amazing colleagues. My last role was something that was really challenging. I was working between the CEO and the CFO of a global multinational organization with a lot of exposure, a lot of visibility, and quite a lot of influence. It was really amazing. But I got an itch, and the itch had been there for a while. And I think that what it was that I'd I felt like I'd proven to myself whatever I wanted to prove to myself that I could do,
Mm-hmm.
as far as that was concerned. And I just didn't really want to take the next natural career path steps. I felt like, you know what, this has come a bit to a natural end. I've checked this box. I've done what I've wanted to do. And I started looking around and, you know, there are many colleagues who had been celebrating, you know, 25 years, 30 years, for example, you know, in a particular role, in a particular organization,
Yes.
which is fantastic and commendable if that's what you want in life. You know, I'm not knocking anybody else's
Mm-hmm.
choices, but I felt like that would be a bit of a disappointment for me. And I thought, you know what? I wonder what else there is to explore and to, it's a curiosity. I keep coming back to this curiosity factor. What else is there to explore? What else can I create? And I really liked the idea of building or creating something from scratch myself, molding that in a certain way. And in corporate, I had been doing quite a bit of work in as well, shaping and growing businesses. And I thought, well, what about shaping and growing something of my own? So it took me a little while to make the decision. It was certainly wasn't an overnight one.
Mm-hmm.
And once I took the decision, it then took me another 6 months to actually leave because
Just a little while. I'm gonna let go. I'm gonna let go.
no, well, part of there are a couple of reasons for that. Partly there was sort of like a 3 months notice that I'd given, but
Of
also
course.
I
Yep.
was leading a program at the time that it was difficult to step out at that moment. Um, and it felt really good as well because people were not that happy to see the back of me. So there was maybe a little bit of an ego bit there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I also didn't want to leave anybody in the lurch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we had some negotiation and discussion, and then I sort of staggered for the second 3 months, you know, and it
Yeah.
was like a tapered leaving.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I wonder, I often think about how life is not a dress rehearsal, and you have to take that step, don't you? Was it a difficult thing for you to do, even though you went through that transition away from a corporate role? Was it hard for you?
It was hard. It was definitely hard. You know, I think the day that I started saying to people that I was leaving once I had done the formalities and that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I think there were about 2 days of highly emotional discussions with various people and tears and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then those, you know, it was hard for me because I'd always been working on something where I was building something. And then I started to need to work towards building away from it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
making sure that enough was in place to hand over my baby to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not the easiest thing to do. And I think part of it as well was what was hard was I didn't at that time have a plan of what I was going to do afterwards, which not many people believe me when I said, because I'm usually somebody with a plan.
Yes.
I didn't have a plan, and I specifically chose not to have a plan because I knew that I would be able to be um, for a little while before I needed to be earning money
Mm-hmm.
again. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a long while, but I could afford to have a little bit of a gap. And what I wanted was to step out of what had been a really hectic lifestyle and say, okay, let me create the new when I'm in the space of the new, rather than, you know, trying to scramble for something while I had my mind on so many other things. And that was difficult because it was difficult for me not having a plan. It was also difficult just thinking, you know, trying to imagine what life would be like after, um, you know, the final date.
That you've made that shift away, and there's a couple of things I've taken away from that, Bridgette. This idea of um, the emotion that comes with it, and I'd love to talk about that in terms of how it relates to leadership,
Mm-hmm.
but also just to keep in mind, Bridgette, that the My Future Business audience are startup entrepreneurs, they're existing small to medium sized business owners, and they're
Yep.
people who are wanting to do something more, just as you have done. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to deep dive into some of the, I guess, the steps, the journey that you actually took in the following 6 to 12 months when you started to build your business. What was that like?
Well, that was an interesting time. I must say that when I, you know, sort of stepped into, let's say, stepped over the threshold and now I had all this free time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had imagined that I was going to spend a little bit of that time, you know, reading all the hundreds of books I've always wanted to read. And I, you know, ordered a whole bunch of stuff from Amazon. And I thought I would spend a lot of days of leisure. And in a little way I did.
Mm-hmm.
But I also let my mind follow some curiosity paths because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Um, and I mean, I have different areas of interest, and it wasn't obvious for me exactly which one I was going to use to create a business foundation on.
Yes.
But what I found was that, I had seen, oh, there's like a meetup group about a certain subject. Oh, that looks interesting. Let me go ahead and see what that's all about. Or, there were some webinars or there were some events that I just decided to go to just because I was curious and it really appealed to me. I wanted to also expand my network and meet people in different walks of life or different sectors that I hadn't necessarily connected with before. And I suppose it was like one thing led to another, and then some patterns started emerging for me. And I started to see where my natural passions were leading me, and what was really getting me excited. And at the same time, I had people reaching out to me because they heard that I was embarking on something new and inviting me to get involved with certain activities or inviting me to participate in certain things. And it started to show me that where not only do I have a natural inclination or a natural interest, but also where I'm most appreciated is in the role of helping to build businesses and to grow businesses and to shape ideas into something concrete that then can be commercialized. So I suppose life took me down that path,
Hmm.
maybe without as much conscious thought as I had thought. But if I look back, and hindsight is a wonderful thing because when you look back and connect the dots
Yes.
and maybe see that pathway that was there, but in that moment, it wasn't necessarily that obvious for me that that was the path that I was following.
And it's interesting how others oftentimes help to shape what we
Hmm.
become, both privately and professionally. I wonder, in all of that, were you able to unwrap and find your unfair advantage that you talk about in your bio? How did that come about for you?
Um, I think that maybe one of my unfair advantages is that I really connect people and I connect the dots quite well.
Mm.
Um, and if I go back to, maybe in the professional context, very often whenever a business is starting on a project or involved in a project, you often have these sectors where, for example, the people who are involved in, let's say, the techie side of things
Mm-hmm.
have one view of things, and it seems so obvious to them that this is a certain perspective. And
Yes.
someone who's involved in maybe the people side of things has a completely different perspective or a slightly different perspective. Maybe it's a little bit, maybe it's a lot.
Yep.
And somebody who's maybe in the operations or somebody who's maybe on the leadership side, there's all these different perspectives that seem very natural to each person in their particular seat. And sometimes the communication lines never really gel because people are not able to bridge that gap or get beyond their own perspective. And sometimes, you have conversations where people are speaking with cross purposes. Um, and that's one of the main contributions that I often make into these, business areas is that I'm able to listen to what each person is saying and translate it, if you like, even if we're
Yep.
talking about the same language, but to translate it into the speak that the other one needs to be able to digest and to understand and then to contribute. Um, because translation happens very much within a language, not only between languages.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because you obviously have a worldview on business and communication and transforming businesses. I wonder, is there a lot of, I guess, cultural differences that you have experienced along the way, and how has that affected the way that you help businesses transform?
I think there are certain, shall I say, fundamental truths that are present in every transformation. One of it is that there is going to be a certain degree of confusion. There's going to be a certain degree of, I suppose you could call it resistance, but it's more the matter of, people are afraid. What is in it for me? What's going to change? How does this impact my job? How
Yeah.
does this change the way that things work in the company? Um, from a leadership perspective, of course, it's always about the return on investment, and it's the balance between how much better is it going to be versus how it is right now, because knowing that there's probably going to be some pain along the way. So is it worth it to just stick with how we are today with a few little tweaks, or should we go through the pain of transformation, and are we sure it's going to be that much better on the other side? And how do we get our people through that, because it's going to be a long journey. Now, if you bring a cultural in, and I think that relates to just about every transformation, no matter where you go, no matter how big or how small it is, there's an element of
Yeah.
that involved. And then when you get down to, let's say, cultural specifics, then it's about um, how you lead people through that journey. And certain cultures have different ways of dealing with things. So for example, and I'm going to make some huge generalizations over here, but I mean, I'm South African. I come from a culture that is relatively much more direct.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like the Australians, I guess. We
Yes.
tend to say it like it is. Um,
No beating around the bush.
no beating around the bush. You can have a little bit of the, suck it up, buttercup kind of thing going on.
Yes, absolutely.
A long way. And sometimes it's okay to say that in a context.
Mm-hmm.
Say to
Mm-hmm.
somebody, look, this is the way it is, and I'm sorry that you don't like it right now, but hang in there with me. There's going to be a little bit of pain, but you know what? We're going to get through this. Let's go, go, go. And that's something that can work again in a specific context, in a South African, Australian kind of context, a little bit more than perhaps in some of the Asian cultures that I've worked with. So I spent a few years living in the Philippines, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and that would just be too tough an approach to have. It's much more of an inclusive culture. It's much more, you need to have much more dialogue, be a lot more empathetic, a lot more listening, a lot more understanding. Having sort of, barking instructions at somebody, for example, is going to destroy everything.
Oh no.
Completely destroy everything. You got to learn how to ask questions in a way that's not too direct, because people sort of shy away generally from something that is too direct. And what you really want is to have collaboration. So you need to draw people out in a much more roundabout kind of thing, kind of way. And that's something I learned, I think, the hard way, because my very first international posting was in fact going from South Africa to the Philippines, and I put my foot in it a few times where, I was like, all right, people, let's move. Okay, what do you think? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And it was completely the wrong approach, and I needed to learn some cultural sensitivity there.
There was, they weren't looking for confrontation, were they?
Not at all. Not at all.
I wonder, what about other cultures like the Japanese culture? I know that if I recall correctly, they're big on gifts. Is that another type of aspect that you would look at in how you would manage a project and how you'd manage transformation?
I think if I speak about my time in China,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, I suppose India, Bangladesh as well, there's quite a bit of a gift culture that's involved. And certainly when I was leading some transformational projects over there, being the leader of a particular program or a particular project, it's a bit overwhelming sometimes as well, where you sort of put on a bit of pedestal as well. Um, and I think in China I was often called teacher,
Oh,
you know,
because you're there to make changes happen, basically.
yes, yes. Um, and that brings a lot of responsibility as well, because I prefer to be working in, I would have a role to facilitate rather than to come with the solutions.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it's always interesting to be able to work with people, because the people who are working in a particular company, in a particular role, in a particular job, they know what they're doing inside out. They know the process, they know the markets, they know the business. And the role of somebody who's leading a type of transformation is not to go there and say, I'm the expert and I know everything that you don't know.
yeah.
The role is to really facilitate. And of course, we have tools and methodologies and expertise that we bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
but it's about bringing the business expertise from the business experts themselves,
It's absolutely.
and drawing that knowledge from there, because nobody will have all the answers. The value that somebody who is in the business, who's grown the business, who's participated in it day in and day out, has a value that just cannot be replaced.
It's absolutely a unique skill because I've seen it myself in the corporate environment at executive level, and you think to yourself, this facilitator is absolutely magic. They are not necessarily a specialist like you were mentioning in any given area, but they just know how to connect the dots and bring people together. Now, I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit about technology and
Mhm.
your book, Humanity Through Technology. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I think that in this particular time, where many of us are affected by the impact of the coronavirus,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think we're all seeing some of the benefits that technology is bringing in helping us to remain more human. Um, and it's an interesting concept because I chose the title of it firstly, Humanity Through Technology, because I really believe that we have gone beyond the subject of man versus machine.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that, unless it's in the realm of sci-fi movies where, robots are going to take over the world and, sort of
AI
like,
and all the rest of it.
exactly, and enslave the human race, which is, quite sensational. And that's, great from a fictional perspective. But I really believe that we have all realized, or we're starting to realize, that what technology brings is an ability to help human beings go beyond what they can do, to fill in the gaps, to work together. So it's not man versus machine; it is human plus,
Human.
where technology can be an extension of what it is that we want to do. And I'm very positive. I'm very hopeful, and I am. I'm not naive. I understand that there are risks, and I understand that there are some unknown territories, and we need to work on governance, and we need to work on some rules, and we need to work on some stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I'm very positive about how technology is going to be able to help human beings connect with each other more, how to help human beings to achieve much more than before, and to fill in the gaps that, quite frankly, we've been failing in. And I think the benefits to society, the benefits to the environment, the benefits to the economy is going to be fantastic. Um, so when I had published the book, and I've given a few keynote speeches about, on this topic as well,
Mm-hmm.
I've often had, quite a bit of skepticism where people have said, oh, it really is, I don't think we're going to have more humanity. I think that computers are going to mean, that there's less. Just look at the teenagers and, all the people, not only teenagers, who spend all their time glued to their screens and they don't communicate with anybody anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or, look at the isolation, the social isolation that comes about because people prefer to, bond with technology more than human beings. And I think, yes, there is some of that, but look at where we are right now in this context, where most of the world is in some form of either lockdown or physical distancing through, because we have to curb the spread of a virus
Yep.
that's going around the world. And you look at how, thanks to technology, we're able to have virtual dinner parties with friends. We're able to conduct business, without, yes, there's been a lot of interruption and disruption of business, but there are still things that are able to continue. I spent, I've been having sort of family gatherings, over Zoom and other video conferencing facilities,
Mm-hmm.
having
Mm-hmm.
sort of, some social gatherings like that. And you just think about how there is that ability for, where the physical world has certain limitations, the virtual world is able to fill in the blanks.
It's funny, isn't it? We can you imagine right now being without the ability to turn on Zoom or Skype and still at least look and speak with our loved ones and our colleagues and workmates. It would be a lot harder than what it is now. I wonder, Bridgette, what do you see for the future of business post COVID-19?
I think there's a huge shift that sometimes um, we feel was forced upon us right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we begin to appreciate that a lot more. Um, I'm sure you might have seen this little, graphical meme that's been floating around social media saying, when it comes to digital transformation, who was the decision maker for you? Was it the CEO? Was it the CIO? Or was it the COVID-19 virus?
Mm.
Um, and it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I think that what it has taught us is that there is a lot more that can be done in a digital context or a virtual context than we had thought possible before. Now, some businesses have needed to or still need to shift into having virtual service offerings or offer virtual solutions to
Mm-hmm.
clients, or
Yeah.
else they may not survive, or it might just be that, it's not only about surviving the short term, but it might mean that you can actually reach a whole new audience. You can reach a whole new market that you'd never known existed before. So I think it's going to teach us that some things that we had thought, or we were maybe skeptical about, could it work? We've had to try it. And in having to try it, we've realized that it can work, and maybe we've learned on how it can work or what benefits it could bring. I think that some businesses have had to accelerate playing around with that for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But I also think it's going to teach us something about the physical working environment, and also what, it's going to challenge what the future workplace will look like. And again, it's not to say that we will all want to stay at home and work from Zoom in future, but I know that there were companies that were very skeptical about having working from home policies or, virtual policies, and it's proving right now that it can work. There's always the question of, will people be responsible enough or productive enough to not be working in a more managed physical environment? Many businesses have been doing this for a long time. There are fantastic stories. There are lessons learned. There's all sorts of experiences, just like you have in a physical office. You have all sorts of experiences there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is going to challenge what it means to, on how we work together.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, because even online speaking arrangements, of which you are a keynote speaker, I'm hearing a lot of talk and a lot of invites I've received to attend online keynote talks. Are you starting to venture into that space yourself with your talks?
Not so much just yet. I mean, when I talk about keynotes, not in the sense of, being in front of an audience of, say, 1,000 people or more.
Right.
But certainly I've been doing a lot more, virtual webinars and, these kinds of meetings, meetup groups and that kind of thing, and participating in that. I think it's going to be interesting because for the context of, let's say, your smaller group meetings, and that could be what may have been like a networking event where maybe it would have been, 20 or 50 people, for example, meeting with snacks and a glass of wine. I think as many of these are continuing over things like Zoom and other platforms, you might find that some of those might continue. But what will be interesting for me is looking at like these major conferences, where you have thousands upon thousands of people attending, because I think that's going to be very much, challenged in the near future. Like, there is a large tech conference every year in Boston called LiveWorks.
Yep.
It's quite interesting. LiveWorks takes place usually around June each year, and there's several thousands of people that attend that, and it's over several days. And, not long ago, there was a message that LiveWorks this year is going to be held virtually rather than in person. So when you start seeing that's going to be super interesting, because that's in a massive exhibition center in Boston, convention center. You normally have, 2 or 3 main stages, and you have several breakout rooms where you have all kinds of, agendas happening concurrently. So it'll be quite interesting to see how events of that size do morph. And it'll be interesting as well for me to see what the appetite of participants will be to go to in-person events where there will be thousands of people, whether it's, exhibitions, big conferences, seminars, and even things like sporting events and concerts. When will people feel confident to say, okay, I think the scare is over.
Yeah.
Sure, I don't mind joining something like that.
It's another interesting dynamic is the software developers behind the scenes, because we've talked about the spaces that you were just mentioning with breakout rooms and 3 or 4 main stages and a long list of guest speakers. And there is already amazing software out there that facilitates that sort of, I guess, experience. Now, I'd love to go back a little bit and ask you about your first exposure to technology. And firstly, are you a lover of technology, or somebody who has grown to accept it and use it for what it is?
I'm quite techy, I have to say.
As am I.
I'm not a, well, let me qualify that. I'm not a techie person. In fact, I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not a developer, in that sense.
Yes.
I don't have the skills to really call myself a techie. I would say from a user perspective, I'm quite a techie fan. So, so I do like the bells and whistles. I do like the features that technology brings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like discovering new apps and, what that can do for me, how I can be more productive, how it can be something really, really cool. Sometimes it's entertainment value. Sometimes it's because it makes something happen better, whether it's quicker, whether it's maybe cheaper, maybe it's more efficient, like, whether, when you first started, like ride sharing, for example, be it
Mm-hmm.
Uber or Lyft or any of these companies, and before perhaps you were using either public transport or a taxi system if you were traveling, that sort of like buzz of finding something that works and works quite well. This I really appreciate.
That's fantastic. And I would think that at Legend SA, which is your business, that you would
Mhm.
talk a lot about innovation, technology, and how to integrate it into one's business. Is that part of the thrust at Legend SA?
Absolutely. We are consultants and we specialize in growing businesses. And we often talk about taking business to the next level. Now, that seems like a very general concept, but we keep it quite general because the next level in one business is not necessarily the next level in the next.
Yeah.
Um, so usually when we are first working with our client, our very first question or our very first area to explore is, where are you right now and what could a next level be for you in your business? Now, everybody knows that when a business grows, what you want to do is you want to increase revenue, you want to have, better profits, you maybe want to expand the market. And, these are some obvious things. That's the direction every business is heading into.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, how do you get there? What's the next step for you to get there? And, that next step, it might be for some business, it might be, just figuring out how to launch my product into a market or into a new market. For another business, it might be, how can I take what we've been doing fairly manually for years and put that into a digital context? And because we can put that into a digital context, we can maybe scale the business, or we can stop serving only our physical environment around us, maybe the neighborhood or the city or the region. And maybe because we can find a way to put our business online or to have virtual offerings of our solution, we can easily be sitting in Switzerland, for example, and working with clients in South America, North America, Russia, China, India, everywhere, Australia.
Yep.
So how can we move that? For another business, what the next level could be is maybe stabilizing where you are. So it doesn't always have to be getting bigger and better and faster. Sometimes what a business needs, especially those that have had quite a few changes or maybe even a great growth spurt, is to say, all right, before you even try to take a next step, let's stabilize and concretize where you are right now, because otherwise you're going to be a little bit wobbly and you're going to be at risk of whatever is going to happen next. So sometimes it means looking at things like your team, your employment, your employee engagement, because maybe you've got a lot of people coming in that you're training, but they're also leaving pretty fast, or, there's a high rate of turnover.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we get people to want not only great people in, but great people staying, and, creating a nice solid culture around that? That's a good platform for building the brand, a good platform for, for taking that forward. The next level maybe is about, let's work on our customer experience, because we've got a good customer base. We're getting a lot of new clients in, but they're not necessarily staying with us, for, creating what we call a great life cycle, lifetime value.
Yeah.
So what can we do that people are so happy with us and absolutely thrilled and blown away that they want to stay with us for the next and the next and the next, whatever that might be in the business. So there's many different things that a next level could be in any particular business. And again, we don't like to assume a one size fits all.
No.
So our very first thing usually is working with a client and saying, all right, well, let's see where you're at and what it could be. Now, sometimes our clients come in with quite a good idea of what they would like to achieve. And other times they just, they come to us and they say, this is where I am. I've been having this business for X amount of time. which could be a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years. This is where I am. This is what we've done so far. What could we do next? What do you think is the next step for us? And then, we're able to propose some things as well after we do a little bit, we get to know them a little bit.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Now, I wonder, what are the typical customer bases that you serve? Are they small businesses? Are they large corporates? Who are they?
Both, actually, and everything in between. So it is one of the things that, we often say in businesses, try not to be everything to everybody, because that's often a pitfall that many businesses make. But I would say that in Legend, we have different, shall I call it, products or solutions for businesses at different stages of growth. So for example, for people who are just starting out, who are in the stage of perhaps pre-launching or launching their business, we do have business coaching, which is more appropriate for somebody at that particular stage, figuring out how to take those steps, a bit of mentoring along the way, and some programs, like we have a program called Start Up, Start Right, which teaches you how to be a business owner. And that's great for people who are maybe, pre-launching, launching, and maybe have been running a business for the first time for a few years. It could be 2, 3, 4 years, depending on, an individual and their experience. We also do a fair amount of work with established startups who are then moving into, let's say, a scale-up phase, and moving out of starting up and stabilizing and then going into a scaling up phase. And we do also have some programs that we work on with larger digital transformation or larger business transformation programs or leadership programs that are more suitable to larger businesses and big corporates.
And I notice here that there's obviously a way to contact you on your site, legend.eu.com. Now, also part of that, is this the same location that people that are interested in your book can find Humanity Through Technology?
Yes, absolutely. The book is, by the way, it's available on Amazon, and it's in both ebook and also printed copy format.
And there's no surprises there, Bridgette. Bridgette, look, this has been just an absolutely fantastic conversation about the many aspects of the entrepreneurial journey, the mindset that goes along the creation of solutions, the ability to serve globally, technology, and just so much more. And I just have to say, it's just been a wonderful journey with you on the My Future Business show today.
Thank you, Rick. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.